I would like to introduce Marie Godfrain. She is an independent journalist specialized in design, decoration, and architecture. She writes for Le Monde and collaborates with Ideat and more. Passionate about design since she was a teenager, she passes on these passions to the magazine she works for. Also, she teaches courses in the history of design and curates exhibition about Henri Rive in Paris, for example. In her work, she demonstrates that design and crafts go far beyond the simple production of furniture. They accompany and shape ongoing social transformation.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello everyone. So, as we all know, the 20th century has been the century of functionalism and of the man as a central value of design production. Continuing, amplifying, and perfecting this way of thinking, care design, that a lot of people talk about those days, has become an ethic of responsibility, participating in the universal design effort for the well-being of mankind. But devoted to the mankind, care design is a very humanocentric design, putting aside the other species of the living. And we must admit that it's very convenient to draw for humans because they are the ones placing orders and communicate their needs. But this care, this attention couldn't apply to other species. Of course, we can't talk with a horse, we can't talk with a plant. So it's much harder to know their needs. But as a French writer, Victor Hugo said, it is a sad thing to think that nature speaks and that the human race doesn't listen. Today, however, we have finer ears, better listening tools, and we know that the preservation of the biodiversity is crucial for the survival of our own species. We saw it during crises like COVID, or more silent ones, like the vanishing of bees, that if they disappear will cause the explosion of our way of life. So before we start, I just wanted to share with you two examples of care design. So for men. The Peigno chair, designed by Alvar Aalto for the sanatorium he drew in Finland. This chair is perfect from 2 points of view. First, it was designed to optimize the best position for the sitting tuberculosis patient to breathe. And its plywood surface was also very easy to clean. The other one is a salad spinner, and yes, this is it. For people with arthritis, designed by Sam Farber. His wife suffered from arthritis, and he decided to draw this salad spinner for her. Today, it's one of the best sellers of the kitchen. So, what is good for minorities, for persons usually put aside from design, can eventually be useful for the common good. Why not acting the same way with other species, and what is good for them would also be good for us. For a long time, when designers worked with animals, it was for our own good. They were used to make leather, fur, or wool furniture. Until 2003, when we decided to go as far as designing a sheep, and Dolly was the first cloned animal. And so when we create objects for our own good, we never think about the interaction that can happen between our creations for mankind and animals, plants that surround us. However, if we open our eyes to our environment in the city or nature, we can see that this link exists anyway. For instance, Martin Tomic, professor of interaction design, and director of innovation at the University of Sydney, author of Design Think, Make, Break, Repeat, or Making Cities Smarter, headed a study about non-human personas, including nature, in the participatory design of smart cities, in which he described how non-human spaces can be impacted by design decisions. So, for instance, he gave 2 examples. And for instance, this one is an ibis. And when his department created bins for Sydney City, they found out that ibises decided to interact with the installation. So people who are working for the city of Sydney took those pictures and sent them to this department to show them that they had to deal with ibises eating in those bins like if they were in a food store and just helping themselves very easily. So he found out that designing urban furniture could interact with urban wildlife, which he didn't expect, and he explained that when he created those bins with his team, he just thought about how people could use them easily, but he never thought about how wildlife could interact with them. The first example was an email he received from one of his industry partners, Daktronics, about a challenge they had encountered. Daktronics is a manufacturer of digital billboards based in South Dakota in the US. And they began to install more of their billboards across Australia. And they realized that cockatoos enjoyed taking their LEDs apart, as you can see on the picture, causing significant damages. Later on, one of the Daktronic technicians found out that iguanas and snakes were using the facade to climb up, so those facades, those panels, to climb up buildings and to enter in the apartments. Those examples are to show you that how nature can interact with city and urbanism projects, and how we really must include spaces for plants, for instance, to grow in the gaps, because they will try anyway to find one. And we must think how we can also interact with animals. For instance, what is done those days is creating specific bridges over freeways for animals to cross them. But it would be unfair to say that man has never designed for animals and plants. But it has always done that from a humanocentric point of view. For instance, Soviet designers created a specific spacecraft, a Sputnik 2, in 1957, of the size of a dog, when they sent, Laika the dog, one of the first animals in space and the first to orbit the Earth. It was on the 3rd of November, 57. Of course, this test was not for the good of the dog, because it was planned that the dog would die during the flight. But the Sputnik 2 was really created and had the shape of a female dog, because she had exactly the size of this spacecraft. Another humanocentric attitude is to think that the animals have the same needs as we do. For instance, at this time of the year, people can buy and offer advent calendars, which is very common. But nowadays, animal lovers can even buy some for their pets. In the same idea, more and more design brands, from IKEA to luxury one, offer a range of sofas, blankets linked to their collections. Here is an IKEA statement, found on their website. A cat or a dog is not just a pet, it's a family member. And for instance, those two sofas from May.com, so a design company that just closed some weeks ago, offered some copies of their sofas resized for cats and dogs. But as you can see, it's a very humanocentric point of view, because we really wonder if this cat and this dog really enjoys being sitting on this kind of furniture. So today it's time to decentralize this point of view and to consider that the non-self is a persona that we must consider as a subject of creation. It took climate change, the collapse of wildlife, and the COVID health crisis to remind us that we are only a link in the living world and no longer at the top of it. As an example, the COVID, a microorganism, has influenced the design in the last 2 years. To prevent from him, we design specific objects, new interfaces, and services. And as usually man uses its environment to achieve its goals, the COVID used the human body as a vehicle to spread, and we were at his mercy. The role has been reversed. The nature used the man to evolve. And as the nature is endangered and the crisis is global, designers are realizing that the non-individual is a persona to be considered in the field of object design or speculative design. A movement that is also part of the exodus of many young designers to the countryside, this upsetting their point of view of the place of man in the Earth ecosystem. For instance, Thomas Thwaites is a British designer and writer. He describes himself as a designer of a more speculative sort, interested in technology, science, futures research. Thwaites studied economics and biology at University College of London, and in 2009 he studied design interactions at the Royal College of Art in London. He later spent several days living amongst goats in the Alps, using prosthetics, goat-like legs, and eating grass using an artificial rumen to explore the life of goats. This resulted in Goatman, How I Took a Holiday from Being Human. So it was his second book, where he explained all this experiment he spent with the goats in the Alps. And so he tried to do it to experiment the plastic legs he used. So it was a scientific exploration, but also he said he tried to become a goat to escape the angst, I quote, the angst inherent in being a human. So the project became an exploration of how close modern technology can take us to fulfilling an ancient human dream, to take on characteristics from other animals. Today, he's currently resident at OpenCell London, where he's now developing artificial root systems for plants. So he was first interested in animals, and now he's working with plants, trying to interact with them. Merle Berger, so it's not this image. I don't have any for this example, but she was Merle Bergers was a student at Eindhoven School of Design, and she created an installation that reproduces the sound of communication of plants through a fragrant fog she created. So she tried to translate plant communication into 3 scents with her project Lingua Planta. So it's a scent for people, but when they smell it, plants can interact between them. So it's an interaction between plants to plants and human to humans. Another researcher, Alan Hook, created equine eyes. So this is... no, I don't have it neither, sorry. So Alan Hook, equine eyes, it's an accessory that stimulates the vision of the horses, It's a set of design prototypes which are developed to help designers understand other non-human species, so they can design for and with other species. So Alan Hook project contains a set of wearable and usable headsets which test approaches to fostering interspecies connections with horses. The headsets simulate horse vision by taking in two live camera feeds, filtering them, and rendering in an immersive head-mounted display to be experienced by the human animal wearer with their binocular stereoscopic eyesight. The project explores speculative methods for building empathy and understanding of non-human animals. So other examples, such as metaperceptual helmets. So this example by Denise Connolly and Anne Cleary. They created several, 10 different helmets, also to simulate the animal vision. Or another one, superpowers, animal superpowers. So there are wearable devices to also to feel like an animal. So they made them for children and for adults, and so it helps people to feel, to walk, to run like an animal, and to give some empathy with animal. And some designers have moved a step forward and decided to create for animals in the field of design object or speculative design. Regarding design object, we can quote those recent examples. For instance, Mathieu Andriès and Mathis Morin have invented an ingenious concept that might help birds avoid glass buildings. Because all the buildings, the glass buildings in the cities are are killing a lot of birds. We have some numbers. And so those two designers try to find a way to avoid this. And they used a method that some designers use now called the non-human centered design. Non-human-centered design. And they work together with biologists and bird specialists, to help species of birds to thrive or survive in our urbanizing landscape. So this design is specially made for birds. Humans are not even capable of seeing it. What they do is that they add to the glass some calcite minerals, some specific minerals in the windows that emit invisible waves, undetectable for man, but visible for birds, in order birds to avoid the big windows. And this is a good example how we can share the public spaces with non-human cities with non-human. Together with engineers and scientists, because it's something very important when you work with animals. You need to work with scientists and specialists, zoologists and other specialists. Mathilde Belouver, she developed this project, Insectology, Food for Buzz, a series of artificial flowers that transform the rain in sweet water. So she put some in the streets, in the cities, and it's artificial, of course, but it helps as an emergency food source for the big five of pollination: bees, bumblebees, hoverflies, butterflies, and moths. Another example I found was the Danish collective Superflex. So it's a design and an art collective, and those days they have an exhibition in Paris, in the Maison du Danemark, and so they are working on several ideas to link to the environment. And one of them is this small brick made with several different materials. And this project is called As Close as We Get. And so this collective, Superflex, they say that as sea levels continue to rise, human building will soon be underwater. For this reason, it's important to consider the needs and desires of marine life in our construction decisions, according to Superflex. So for them, fishes are the future occupants of our houses. So this can be seen as design for tomorrow, but they try to experiment today with at small scale. And As Close as we get is a small example of what they can do. So it's a series of sculptures that function as a potential home for fishes. They use it those days in some small rivers or seashores. And they say that because ocean biodiversity thrives around structures with abundance of surface area, these modular building blocks of As Close as We Get are designed to feature many flat, irregularly sized plants. They want to look beyond human perception of time. With this project, As Close as We Get, they utilize materials with various relationships to geological time, from stone to specially made fish-friendly bricks. So this is halfway between speculative design and object design, because they want to develop it at a bigger scale, but today, at this small scale, it already works, and they already see that that fishes are using those smaller bricks. So obviously, speculative design is involved in design for non-human. And for instance, Andrés Lucerno and Elena Irki-Douglas, so they have imagined the project Internet for Dogs, and what it would mean to be a dog on the internet, and what the dog internet should look like. So their starting point was that dogs are often alone at home and unable to socialize, making them prone to negative and problematic behaviors due to the lack of dog-to-dog contact. So we know that we have already tried to connect animals through cognitive tests, but never to be connected together in a meaning way for them. So this project, Internet for Dogs, remain, of course, a design fiction project, as we cannot question directly or a dog or a non-human animal for that matter. But design fiction for animal technology opens up a world of fantasy prototype. So here are some examples that where designers are working on those days. And as the loss of a natural habitat is growing, designers today must identify how they can compensate for this loss. This work of searching with animals is good for biodiversity, of course. And the good for biodiversity is also good for the well-being of man, because we are part of this biodiversity and we very often forget it when we create projects. It's something that everybody knows, but when we see today's the creation, we see that when people work, they really forget about the rest of the planet. So I think that working for animals and plants question us about the place of man in the living and how preserving biodiversity is crucial for us. So to end, I would like to introduce you to Victor, the white child. So he's a child that was found in south of France 200 years ago. He was raised, it's a real story. He was raised by animals until he was 12, where men found him. And so animals like wolves or dogs so helped him. He was abandoned by his parents. And so those animals helped him to survive. And so the film director François Truffaut made a movie out of this story. And what he wanted to tell about this story, about Victor, he really wanted to interrogate the place of man and animal and how they can interact, and when we are an animal and when we are a man. And so until the death story of Victor and until the end of the movie, it's really this interrogation that François Truffaut was wondering. And so I think that today this idea of the place of man and animal is a very topical issue. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And it's very hard to find any question. What do you think? How now in Paris the life of a human and animal? It's how it's begin. There are some problem in the life between human and animal in Paris. What do you think?
So during the pandemic, we saw in the first days that a lot of animals walked in the streets and took advantage of benches and all the urban furniture. And it took them like 2 weeks or 3 weeks to make the city their playground. So everyone was really shocked and shared images about that. But I think that now, 2 years after this, everyone is forgetting about their place, which is crucial today. And it's like in the countryside, when you have interaction with wolves and farmers. And I think that now we must... we know that we must interact and we must live together, and killing all the animals and putting them aside is not a solution. So that's why I think urbanists must really think about the place of animals and plants in the city. And we know we need trees in the city. And we know that trees also suffer from pollution and stress. For instance, in Paris this summer, a lot of trees died because of the pollution, because of the heat, and they also we also discovered that the noise was very bad for trees. So they really have the same feeling feeling or that man. So yes, that's what I would say.
Thank you.
No?
Okay. Or was there another, sir? Oh, okay, thank you. It was fascinating presentation, thank you. I did want to ask about, what about the animals that actually do really well with human beings? For example, I'm from Montana, and, you know, for example, coyotes have flourished. Certain species of birds do very well. It's not unusual for elk or deer to come down into the town. A few years ago, we had a bear in the high school, came into So I see your point about designing for ways that facilitate certain, but how do we decide which animals we want, right? And what about those that apparently maybe become too familiar with human beings that thrive with human? Have the animal designers thought about those sort of questions, and what do they say when they do think about that?
Yes, for instance, now in Paris, we say that we must not kill mice anymore, but we must sterilize them. So it's not a fight, but it's just we must cooperate with animals. And you were talking about which species we want to interact with. But for instance, wolves, in France or in Spain, we have a very hard relationship with them because we are really scared of them. But in Italy, they found a way of collaboration with wolves. And they try to explain, so when we know how they interact with men, and because a lot of animals, when you're not aggressive with them, they're not with you. So in Italy, they found a very interesting way of interacting with wolves, and so they train farmers to this way of interacting. And now the cohabitation is much better than in places like France, where they just want to kill them. And so maybe it's not just design, it's a wider point of view. But yes, I think there's always a solution to interact and to collaborate, to interact with animals. Good or bad species, I mean good or bad in our... but yes, we all have...
Yeah, maybe I think it's an interesting question. For example, at Cornell University in Ithaca, there is a lot of teak inside the forest, and this teak is bearing a disease for human, and so
Lyme disease.
Yeah, and so for the people, they don't want that the cats and the dog go out of the house, so they keep the animal inside, because if they go out, they bring back the tick, and so it's dangerous. So it's create a very strange relationship, because it's the university is inside the forest, so but there is this impossibility really to go in the forest because of that. And we know that also there is a story, in China with a building full of trees, a little, and it was colonized by insects and mosquitoes, that was dangerous, and so it created a nightmare, and nobody want to live there, and so my question is, I know that in France especially there is a lot of discussion about this idea of diplomacy with animals and things like that. But me, I just wondering myself if there is not a kind of extension of colonialism. So it's mean that after colonizing some other human, we want to colonize with our own rules and diplomacy the non-human and the animal. So I'm not completely sure that if it is a good way to deal with animals, to say, okay, you mosquito, you have to be inside our French law, and but you know, so I have some question about that. What do you think?
So I think first that we must. You were talking about the wood in the so. Because for us it's decorative. We put some wood because it looks natural and it looks, but maybe people don't know what qualities have this wood. Maybe because if you use this wood, people who know it, they know that it brings insects or so. But I think we are not aware of. We see the nature, we see animals, we see plants as just decorative, and so that's why I think we must have this cooperation with them. And for me, it's not colonialism; it's on contrary. We try to colonialize the countryside, and after nature tried to come back because. Now they don't have space anymore, so they try to as you said, so the bears that come in the city and everything. So we must admit that we are part of them, and how we can deal with it. That would be the question. And I don't know how. I don't have the answer, but we are part of this ecosystem, and so we must think about what is our place in this ecosystem, and we are not on the top of it anymore, so, yeah.
Really fascinating presentation, thank you. I was wondering, do you think there's anything to be learnt from places like Chernobyl, where obviously there was a huge nuclear disaster, all the humans left, and then over the years, animals sort of came back and also had evolved due to the radiation. And is there anything to be learnt about the way that the animals started to sort of come back and use a human civilization development?
Yeah. I saw this. This example, and it's very interesting because they came back before human, and it's something I think people should study to know how they evolve, because. Sometimes they are very aware of what happens. You know, we say that they feel when there's a fire or these kind of things much longer before man, or even an earthquake. Or so maybe they can feel things about radiation, or that could be interesting to understand. Yeah, to study.
I just wanted to raise maybe a question. What if our environment was not made to live with animals and humans at the same time? For example, we saw that during some lockdowns, a lot of animals took our places. For example, like in Venice, we could see fishes swimming and stuff.
Dolphins and
but also it showed a lot of dependence of certain species from humans. For example, monkeys in India, or birds in the cities that were not able to feed themselves without the help of humans. So what if the design of today was to try to create something for them in their habitat and not always taking humans in the equation?
Yes, but their habitat is smaller and smaller. That's why they come in the city. So it's also now we know, for instance, when we build new neighborhoods, new areas of the cities, we know that we took it from natural space. So, and that a lot of animals like lynx. Can't live anymore where they used to live, or when a road is built, sometimes it crosses a natural environment, and those animals can't. So, yes, the best would be that they could live on their own, but it's illusional because they have so few natural space for them that we must also include this idea of how we can live with them in cities, because in cities and even nature, because man is everywhere in the nature now.
It's very interesting, but I think for question time, for a reason of time, it's better if we go to the next one. So thank you very much, Marie. Thank you.